the iOS and Android devices. And while you download, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are free. Remember that. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, and Fire Sticks. Roku and Roku Sticks are also on all smart TVs 2016 and forward. And a welcome to you wherever you may be watching on this Wednesday, June 10th. Of course, on the Sports Wrap, 12 o'clock. Every weekday, we start it up and update you on what's happening in the world of sports. And wherever you may be, you can do this. You can go to whatever you look at for when sports are coming back, and you can check off the MLS as the next league to officially announce that they are coming back. It's going to start July 8th. But yes, the MLS. We had heard for a long time that it's going to be at that Disney World complex in Orlando at the resort. That's where the MLS is going to play. So, teams can start going there as early as June 24th. So 2 weeks from now. So things are really moving here. The MLS is back. Let's talk about how they're going to bring the MLS back. Now, if a lot of people might not remember, because it's kind of hard to wrap your head around it, but prior to the suspension of the MLS season, 2 games had already been played. Right, for each team had already played in 2 batches, right? And I guess that's going to be completely thrown out the window. It wouldn't make sense even to acknowledge those games. It's just 2 games, right? So those 2 games done. What's happening is all 26 teams in the MLS, every single one of these teams are going to be involved in what they're calling a World Cup style tournament. Okay, so again, July 8th is the day. Now I'm going to go through this. But before I do, I just want to say, this is engaging. This is exciting. I think a lot of people are going to be watching this. This is a World Cup style kind of tournament. That's what they want to capture here, that kind of vibe where it's quick, right? They're going to divide the teams into 6 groups. You play 3 group games. And then after that, you got to make it to the round of 16. And to make it to the round of 16, you got to finish in the top 2 of your group, or you got to finish in 3rd place and have one of the top 4 best records of 3rd place teams in the MLS. And that's how you get to the round of 16. So 16 teams will get through. 10 will be eliminated after 3 games are played of the group stage. And that's how it's going to happen. And after that, I assume we're doing single elimination. I think this is engaging. It's exciting. The MLS is in a similar position of Major League Baseball, which of course will be a big topic of conversation today. But, in the same kind of way, the MLS, yes, 2 matches were played prior to the suspension, but it was just 2 matches. We can almost write it up as if the season never started, just like Major League Baseball. And imagine if Major League Baseball ever did something like this, the chaos that would be spewed through the baseball world. It would just be unbelievable. If baseball did like a tournament, right, it wouldn't go over well. We know that. But in the MLS, 6 groups. And after that, it's going to be quick. Now, in the press release, they mentioned that the games are going to come fast, right after another. When you watch the World Cup, right, there's a game every day. Boom, boom, quick. There's always something on. And the MLS wants to do the same thing. So there's going to constantly be soccer on. And this is actually going to end in August, August 10th, around there, in that range. So this is going to get over with quite quick. And the winner of this tournament will qualify for a spot in the CONCACAF Champions League, the Scotiabank CONCACAF Champions League. So the MLS coming back in stunning fashion in a way that really shows that, yes, they're serious about really engaging people right away. That's why it's stunning. They're not wasting any time. Okay, so they're coming back full blazing here. The MLS is ready to go. July 8th. We will see the MLS back. That's how I let off the sports wrap. Today, though, there's something in the sports world that, hey, you know what? Remember when the NFL draft happened, how excited we were? Today is the first round of the MLB draft. Yes, the MLB draft. Now, usually if the MLB draft, number one, it's usually 40 rounds. We've already heard from announcements several weeks ago, it will only be 5 rounds this year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And not only is it usually 40 rounds, but it usually also takes place while there's also major league games going on at the same time, right? In mid-June, There's just major league games where there's a distraction, right? I mean, you're watching your favorite major league team or you're watching the players that you're interested in and not really having your full devotion to the MLB draft. That's usually what happens unless you're a complete draft junkie. But if you're just your average casual fan, you're watching the major league games. You're not watching the draft necessarily. You're probably going to keep up with it later on, but you're not watching it live. You can watch it live tonight. There's no major league games. Okay. And also, on top of that, it's something that can maybe distract you from all the bargaining talk between the owners and the players. So usually major league games distract us from the draft. This year, the draft can distract you from bargaining talk that you maybe don't want to hear all the time. I know it's tough sometimes to hear about money and this, and we're arguing about, dollars and cents. It can be difficult, especially when you don't feel like progress is being made, but you can watch the MLB draft. How about that? Okay, so let's talk about the draft for a second here. Of course, the Houston Astros. Let me start here, and then I'll get more into it. The Houston Astros will not make a selection tonight. They are serving their penalty for the sign stealing scandal, which takes away a first-round pick. Their draft will begin tomorrow. Now, tomorrow on Thursday, the draft will conclude, right? So it's just round one tonight, similar to how the NFL does it. And then tomorrow, the rest of the draft will take place. Now, hopefully this draft will be the main focus for fans over the next few days. Again, we have heard Major League Baseball in the sports news a lot, and it hasn't been too positive. Okay, it hasn't necessarily been a good look for Major League Baseball. This can change a little bit. The draft is tonight. I think it's exciting. Okay, and if you're looking from a Blue Jays perspective, the Toronto Blue Jays this year, they're selecting 5th overall. They haven't picked in the top 5 since 1997. It's been a while since the Blue Jays have picked this high. And in 1997, they selected Vernon Wells with the 5th overall pick. Yes, it's been a while. Toronto, not a good performance on the field last year. Yes, it's a young team, but that's what you get. And I think the Blue Jays are going to be all over this draft. When you have a top 5 selection, you got to bank on that player being pretty good. And when you're comparable right now in the Blue Jays organization is Vernon Wells, the last time that a top 5 draft player was taken, it was him. Well, the expectations are going to be there. Okay, 160 players will be taken in this draft. Of course, usually in the MLB draft, there's 40 rounds. There's so many players that are taken. It stretches out so much. Last year, there were over 1,200 players that were taken, right? And it's a different situation now. Only 160. It shows the damage that COVID-19 has had, not just on the season, but on things like the draft. It didn't affect the NFL draft too much because the NFL got really lucky with the timing. We'll see how the NHL draft has affected NBA draft. This is the first draft, in a sense, in the 4 major sport leagues since the NFL draft. And MLB usually takes a back seat in terms of draft coverage. And please, I'm going to clarify what I'm saying here. I'm talking in terms of an audience on television. I'm talking in terms of an event. It takes a bit of a back seat compared to the NBA or NFL draft. That's just the truth. So we'll see when there's really no sports going on. We'll see how the MLB draft performs today. Draft Insider, Kylie McDaniel. I've been reading his mock draft stuff. It's been fantastic. There is a consensus number 1 pick here. It's first baseman Spencer Torkelson, who, he has the comparable of what Spencer is called, or excuse me, Kylie McDaniel is calling Pete Alonso from the Mets. And, Torkelson here, his comparable where Kylie is saying really should almost overtake that. He should be one of the top first basemen in baseball. This is a consensus number 1 pick. And in baseball, when you're a consensus number 1 pick, the expectations are high because usually there's a bit of debate amongst players in the MLB. That's just how the draft works. But this player here seems to be the guy. So we'll see how that goes. And again, I'm going to be interested in the performance of the draft in terms of television If you're in Canada, this will be on television. You can watch it. If you're in the United States, this will be, well, it also always is. But in Canada, it's a lot more accessible this year. So you can figure out how to watch that. It will be televised. So we'll see how the performance of the MLB draft does in such an irregular year. I'm going to continue with baseball. And of course, yesterday I talked about that proposal that the MLB tabled. There was 76 games. You had 75% prorated salaries. The reports are indicating that the PA is going to come back here with an 89 game season. 89 games, full prorated salaries, and then expanded playoffs. The expanded playoffs, here's a cool note that we should understand here. The playoffs that we've been hearing about 16 teams coming in the Major League Baseball playoffs. And the reports are indicating that the players are going to propose that the 16 teams expanded playoffs will not only be for 2020, but it will also be for 2021. So this is something that's really making me think here, what is happening with the MLB and what they're thinking of doing with the playoffs going forward. I'm thinking big picture. I'm not thinking about what are we doing this season, let's get baseball going. I'm thinking big picture. And what the MLB is really, and the players as well, what players and owners are really thinking the playoffs are going to look like in, let's say, 5 to 10 years. Because the MLB playoffs were supposed to be a really, really tough club to get into. You'd have to win your division. They added in 1995, they added a wild card team in each league. Even then, it was so difficult to make the baseball playoffs. Now there's a wild card game, and then you play a one game, between two wild card teams. It's still a tough, exclusive club to get into the Major League Baseball playoffs. And what I'm saying, and this is just my perspective and opinion, I'm saying I hope they keep that. I hope they keep the Major League playoffs as an exclusive club. Now, if you're playing a 48-game season in 2020, then I can't complain about 16 teams being in the playoffs. I just can't, right? If you're going to play that short of a season, then, you have to include many more playoff teams, right? Now, why do I say the number 48? That's because, if both sides don't budge, okay, and specifically, I'm talking about prorated salaries, there is a chance and a likelihood that Rob Manfred can implement a 48-game season, no questions asked. And that's if neither side budges, okay? It's really about money. The number of games played is a much more complicated issue than we think. Okay, people might just be throwing their arms in the air and saying, well, who cares about how many games? Let's just play baseball. No, it's complicated because the number of games played is, directed right to the money, right? It's very important, the number of games you play. Now, if you play 48 games, if you're Major League Baseball, and what I'm hearing is that you start the season, even if it's 60 games, but you start the season August 1st and you go up until September 30th, and then you have a wild October of postseason baseball with probably 16 teams involved in that. That's going to be a wild few months. Now, I'm just trying to think here. When you have that little games and such a difference from what we're normally used to in Major League Baseball, we're used to a lot of games, 162. Okay, now I think people, if the number was 114, I think people would get used to that quickly. But if we're talking about 48 games, for example, I mean, how do you think the players are going to take that? How are they going to play? How are they going to change the games? This is what I'm getting at, the on-field product. Because in the NFL, there's only 16 games, and you really feel like every game matters. Are we going to get that kind of vibe in baseball if there's only 48 games? Are we going to have this feeling like we've never had before that every game truly matters? And this is big. And also if there's 16 playoff teams, there's going to be a lot of teams out there thinking, hey, we have a really good shot at making the playoffs. We got to, win. Even a team that usually doesn't look at themselves as a contender and hasn't been involved in the playoff conversation in a little bit, they're going to be a team that's really thinking, let's get off to a good start. I'm starting to come around on the whole idea of excitement. And I talked about the MLS earlier and how I think that is instant engagement, instant excitement. And if you play such a short season, if you're Major League Baseball, you might capture the same thing. And that might be what they're thinking right now, right? I mean, when you're playing that short games, you got to market this thing in a different way. You can't just, and there's no fans. Okay, so you really got to get creative if you're playing that little games. My concerns are obvious. It's the concerns of everyone, the stats, injuries. I think about player contracts moving forward, especially when if you're a free agent after 2020. Those are the main concerns. And of course, if it will feel like a true champion. Excuse me, true champion. Those are my main concerns about playing such a short season. But I can't deny the excitement and how much the games will mean. Just like that. I can't deny it. Okay, so that is the latest on the MLB and MLBPA. We are expecting the PA to table an 89 game proposal that most likely will not be accepted. It's full prorated salaries. It also includes, here was a interesting note in the reported proposal, is that the players union will propose for there to be a home run derby and all-star game after the World Series. And they cite, hey, that's additional revenue for the owners. So, that's just a little note in there. I wouldn't mind that. I think if you're going to play, it's the only way to play it. If you're going to actually do an all-star game and home run derby, the only way to do it is after the World Series, because there's no way you're not taking time off in August now and playing the All-Star. That's ridiculous, right? So it's going to be after, if they even choose to do it. I thought it was interesting how the players threw that in there, trying to spice up the offer a bit for the owners. Hey, you can get extra revenue from that. We'll play the All-Star game. We'll do a derby. This is where we're at with Major League Baseball. Optimism changes day by day, but I think we all hope to see baseball soon. That's it. That's all we can hope for. UFC. Okay, huge announcements in the UFC yesterday. Massive stuff. I've talked about Fight Island for weeks now. And I've said we don't know where the location is. We know where the location is now. Okay, it will be, and this is from Dana White. He announced it. It will be on Yas Island in Abu Dhabi, and there's going to be 4 cards on Fight Island, and they're very close together. Okay, now this is going to be a wild month of July in the world of the UFC. July 11th, July 15th, July 18th, July 25th. That close together, you're going to see UFC, and you're going to see some good fights. 3 title fights right off the bat. Look, the UFC, they have a huge opportunity here. Okay, it's looking more and more likely. We're not going to see, while these fights are going on, we're not going to see NHL hockey. We're not going to see Major League Baseball, most likely. We're not going to see NBA basketball. That's coming a little later. Same with the NHL. We're going to see the MLS, though. I just talked about this. The MLS is really doing this thing where they're going to play games every day. It's starting July 6th. But the UFC has a huge month of July planned, in addition to those 4 cards on Yas Island, or Fight Island, however you want, whatever name you want to call it. There's a huge fight coming at UFC 252. It is the trilogy of the heavyweight championship. This has been a huge storyline in the UFC. Of course, Daniel Cormier, who defeated Stipe Miocic for the first time in 2018 to capture the title, and then Stipe comes in the next fight and he recaptures the title, and it's becoming a great rivalry in the heavyweight division. And that trilogy will happen at UFC 252 on August 15th, a much anticipated championship bout. UFC 241 was the last time they fought. Of course, Stipe got the better of Daniel. It's going to be good stuff. Okay, the UFC is on pace here to have an incredible summer. And Dana White has said, very excited. You're going to see guys, and you're going to see guys like Max Holloway fight. You're going to see guys like Jose Aldo fight. You're going to see guys out here going all out. But here's why I say going all out, because you might not see Conor McGregor, who, of course, prior to the retirement announcement, we thought we would see him on Fight Island. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. Let me talk about Fight Island for a second here. We thought, when I said Fight Island weeks and weeks ago, I think we all envisioned this tropical, beautiful, mythical place that's going to hold UFC events, and it's going to be unbelievably, beautiful, the scenery. Maybe not. Okay, now, that's what we all envisioned. Where Yas Island is, it's more of a tourist destination in the sense that there's a lot of shops. It's a place where people buy things. There's a lot of restaurants. There's hotels everywhere, and of course, to keep the fighters safe and the event itself safe, there's going to be what the UFC is saying, a safety zone of 10 square miles on the island, which will distance Fight Island from everywhere else. And of course, like I said, there's shops, there's dining. That's what's going on. But the UFC fighters are going to have all that for themselves as well. That's where these 10 square border will happen. So you'll have training facilities, top-notch training facilities. You'll have restaurants, and of course the hotels. So Fight Island, which, at first we're thinking, wow, this is quite an idea. Let's see if they can pull it off. It seems as though the UFC is on, pace here to pull this off. And it's going to be a massive, massive summer for the UFC, particularly the month of July, of course. When you have fights and big cards that close apart to each other, it's massive. July 11th, July 15th, July 18th, July 25th. So it's huge. I can tell you Dana White's very excited. If you've heard him talk, he's excited for this. It should be a fun month for the UFC. And beyond that, let me talk from more a journalistic perspective. And that would be the opportunity financially the UFC has and the opportunity for growth they have for Fight Island. When you have such a unique idea and you're holding fights in such an irregular place, because of course, after these 4 cards, Dana White has said the fights will return back to the US. But the scenery, when you just have a casual person watching UFC, the scenery is going to be so much different, right? It's going to look different. That's why I think the opportunity for the UFC to capitalize on this is massive, to get that casual fan, to get that fan that might not watch UFC all the time and maybe watches 1 to 2 cards a year, maybe orders the pay-per-view once a year, something like that. That's where it really happens. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity for the UFC, and definitely we know the month of July now, MLS, UFC. That is all for me today on the Sports Wrap. Remember, this show can also be heard on the BarnBurner Radio Network on its 122 platforms. Yes, 122, you name it, we got it. Please check us out at barnburner.ca for all the news. BarnBurner, watch it, hear it, read it, download it. You can see me at 4 o'clock for Timeout with myself, Logan Lockhart, a massive guest. We're going to do a big NBA talk. It's going to be a fantastic conversation. Joshua Howe, who's a fantastic NBA writer, Toronto-based guy. He's one of the best there is. He's going to join me at 4 o'clock, and it's going to be a tremendous show. I mean, really, we're going to talk best storylines. Okay, we know the NBA is coming back. Return to play. What are the best storylines?